Okay, that I love the word grapple in the name of this podcast. It really feels like it's a big grapple at the moment. Huge opportunities, huge risks at the same time. I think that if I summarize the challenge, the thing that concerns me most, that in our race to be first with the adoption of AI, we'll end up coming last because we just don't get everyone on the bus to make the most of this incredible opportunity. So we have a strong focus at the Smith family on digital inclusion. And unless we have opportunities with AI with a foundation in young people having fundamental access to technology, then we're just going to see inequality widen over time.
Welcome to the AI Grapple Podcast. My name is vanderVoort, founder of the AI Success Lab. Today's episode features a leader who spends every day tackling one of Australia's most urgent challenges, making sure no young person is shut out of opportunity because they can't get online. Doug Taylor is the CEO of the Smith family, an organisation with more than a century of work behind it and a mission that has never been more relevant. He brings a clear-eyed view of how digital access, education and AI are colliding in ways that could either lift thousands of young Australians forward or leave them further behind. This conversation goes deep into the realities facing families who are doing everything they can to support their children, only to be held back by the basics: a device, stable internet, and the skills to use them. Doug lays out the scale of digital exclusion, the urgency of AI literacy, and the responsibility we all share to make sure progress doesn't come at the cost of fairness. He also opens up about leadership, trust, and what humane decision-making looks like in a world where technology is accelerating faster than policy or community expectations. This is a conversation about technology, yes, but even more about people, dignity, and possibility. It sets the tone for the kind of national leadership we need as AI becomes part of everyday life. Let's dive right in. Hi, Doug. Welcome to the AI Grapple Podcast. It is great to have you here.
Thanks, Kate. Great to be with you after all these years. Good to see you again.
I know, it has been a hot minute. Now, I would love you to start just by giving us a little bit of background about who you are and maybe a bit about the work that you're doing with the Smith family at the moment.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Kate. Well, look, I'm kind of doing the same thing from what I was doing when I saw you 20 years ago. So my whole working life's been in the not-for-profit sector. Lots of different roles, different organizations. It's work that I really love. Now I'm the CEO of the Smith family. The Smith family is a 103-year-old charitable organization, and we're focused on addressing educational inequality. So trying to address the things that inhibit a child making the most of their education. It could be as simple as not having enough money for school books or lunches or school uniforms, which has a big impact, but also ensuring that young people experience disadvantage of getting the resources, particularly the technology they need to make the most of their education as well.
If anyone is grappling with AI and this transition that we're going through at the moment, it's certainly you. And I know the Smith family is a name that holds a lot of meaning for a lot of people here in Australia because it's such an amazing organisation that has such a rich history in looking after Australians. So I'm really looking forward to grappling with some of these issues. So the Smith family's mission, as you said, it's all about unlocking that opportunity through education. If we look at it through the lens of AI, how do you see AI reshaping the educational playing field? So for better or for worse, for the students that you support, what does AI mean for them?
I said to you before, Kate, that I love the word grapple in the name of this podcast. It really feels like it's a big grapple at the moment. Huge opportunities, huge risks at the same time. I think that if I summarize the challenge, the thing that concerns me most, that in our race to be first with the adoption of AI, we'll end up coming last because we just don't get everyone on the bus to make the most of this incredible opportunity. So we have a strong focus at the Smith family on digital inclusion. And unless we have opportunities with AI with a foundation in young people having fundamental access to technology, then we're just going to see inequality widen over time. So that's our big concern. When I talk to our students, we support 73,000 students across Australia, all from low-income backgrounds. And when we talk to their parents and carers, 44% of those students are in homes that don't have a digitally connected laptop. So, AI for them, it's a long way away in terms of being something that can be tangibly beneficial to them. So we've connected up 9,000 of our students. We're doing more and more to support them and advocating for the 400,000 other students in secondary schools across Australia to ensure that they've got access. So we need to have this focus on a digital guarantee with access. But in addition to that, we've also got to have this focus on digital skills. I think we tend to assume that young people are, that phrase, digital natives. They've all got the skills, they're using technology. But when you look at NAPLAN data, which is data that we have in Australia that tests for proficiency in literacy and numeracy, they will often test digital capability. And it's actually quite low. So ICT proficiency in Australia is at 46%, and it's lower for disadvantaged students. So we've got to focus on access, but we've got to make sure young people have the skills so they can really make the most of their education through AI and not get left behind. So there's these risks that concern me, but there's also these incredible opportunities. And I might just end with telling you an example of one of the things that we're doing in experimenting with AI to try and address this equity gap in learning. So for a number of years, we've been trying to provide our students with tutoring. At times my daughters have had challenges with particular subjects and I've been able to support them by getting, tutors in to help them. That's made a big difference. The right support and off they go. For students that we support, it's very hard to be able to fund that. And it's hard to do it at scale. A student in Australia who experiences disadvantage by the age of 15 can be 4 to 5 years behind their peers in literacy and numeracy. Now, we've done some things. We can't get enough teachers to support our students. It's very expensive. But we've been piloting an AI tutor, which is through an avatar called Olivia. This tutor is focused on strengthening their engagement and motivation of the students. So we've had 400 young people in this trial. We're just analysing the data. It's highly personalised and it links the curriculum that they're studying to their areas of interest as a way to try and get that engagement going. And we know that engagement drives learning. So there's big risks, Kate, of course, but there's really interesting opportunities as well. The challenge is to make them as universal as possible.
There's so much in what you've just said that I want to unpack. I think the first thing, though, and I was reading an article this morning that you'd written, which I want to ask you some questions about as well.
Yeah.
It floors me that in our country, we still have that level of divide when it comes to accessing technology. And maybe I shouldn't be surprised by that, but the amount of waste that we have of digital, I don't even know what the right language is to describe it, Doug, but the amount of laptops and computers and, there are so many programs that are about repurposing that for people that need them. How do we still have such a divide or such a lack of access to devices and to internet? I mean, that's a really topical issue, but to devices and internet in 2025.
Yeah. I find it as confounding and frustrating as you, Kate. You know that in Australia every year, there are 2 million laptops and computers that are decommissioned by corporations and businesses. So just line up those two numbers, 2 million devices, not all of them are usable, but a good number of them are, 400,000 students in secondary education without a laptop at home. It's pretty solvable. That's not, that's doable.
It's not rocket science.
That's not. It's really not. The issue is, we need a nationally coordinated scheme. So the good news is a consortium of not-for-profits, including Workventures, Good Things Foundation and Good 360 have come together to create this national device bank, which is trying to create an easy way for businesses and governments to provide end-of-life hardware to them. They decommission them, scrub them all the data that's sensitive off it, and then refurbish them with new software and the like. and then make them available. And that's something that we've utilized in trying to, supporting 9,000 of our students so far, but we want to do that a lot more and at scale. So it just requires that organization, to be honest. And it's been a blind spot, Kate. I think that one of the things that made the difference, because we're seeing much more interest now, is I think through COVID, when there was that mandate for all young people to go to homeschooling and go home and use your laptop to access curriculum, the realization that young people who were in households didn't have access were just totally excluded from their education. I mean, schools did good workarounds, printed out things, took them around. Parents were using their phone to try and download things. So people were doing their best. But I think it just kind of put more of a focus on this as being an issue. And I see it as it's the new frontier of poverty, digital access. You don't have access in the way that we're talking about, the practical access, the internet access, and then the skills, you run the risk of being excluded socially and economically.
Yeah. And I mean, my daughter's going to high school next year. So we're right in the midst of buying a laptop for her. And there are so many inexpensive options as well, which is why I'm still really taken aback by those figures that you've shared, because it seems incredible to me that we're still in that place. So, Doug, the article I was reading this morning where you were talking about digital exclusion, not just as a tech issue, but as a barrier to opportunity, and not just opportunity, but dignity and the ability to participate in society. So should digital access and AI literacy be treated as a fundamental right that's on par with food, shelter, and education?
It absolutely should. There's a group of organizations that we're supporting. We're talking about like the digital guarantee. And it's a bit like what we have with public education. We've been so well served by this fantastic institution, the public education system in Australia. So it's free, universal access to education. We're almost at a point of, I think, needing to think the same way about digital access. And just recently, there was some data released on what's called a digital inclusion index that every year tells us how we're going. But there's still too many people excluded. There was a slight improvement, but there's too many that are outside the kind of pools of access and really run the risk of falling behind. There are organisations like ours and others that are doing things, and corporations donating hardware. Telstra just gave us 8,000 units, Deloitte 2,000 units, Optus give us free SIM cards. That's fantastic. But we're at a point where I think we do need to think from a policy perspective about something that's universal and sustainable, so that all people can really fully participate as they should.
Absolutely. And it's an interesting time in Australia where we're dealing with the social media ban and looking at trying to pull young people back from technology. Whilst also being really aware, it is a big issue to grapple with, to balance those.
It's so true. It's a complete paradox, isn't it? So we have a generation of young people where you might think that there's an excess of access, a particular type of access with social media, even though their ICT skills are not where they need to be. That's paradoxical. But then equally, a generation of young people who are just kind of outside that kind of access point. And whilst, most of them will have phones and are participating socially online, what we're talking about is the kind of the hardware and the ability to use the applications that are really necessary to support doing homework, and the like. And often many of the young people that we talk to, parents having to take them down the library. Great that we've got libraries, but lining up for book in spots at the library for technology access, or going down the shopping centre with an old laptop after hours trying to use free Wi-Fi. Those are kind of all workarounds, if you like. We need to make it sustainable for these young people in particular, and also set them up for the future with those digital skills. Jobs of the future are really going to require these skills. So they need to be using the hardware and the applications now to set them up.
One of the things I'm really interested in, I'm going totally off script here. So one of the things I'm really interested in is sentiment towards AI and how people feel about AI at the moment. And one of the interesting things I've noticed in the work that I do in the corporate sector or an enterprise or even in small to medium sized businesses, there's this misnomer that digital natives, young people, are enthusiastic and ready to embrace AI, and that potentially older generations, those of us who are a bit more mature, might be more resistant. And I'm actually seeing the opposite
Is that right?
is true.
Mm.
And what's interesting is a lot of more mature workers who've been slogging away their whole life in their career are like, this is something that can really help me. I
Yeah.
can ride this wave out to retirement. I'm going to have this digital assistant or agents that are going to make my job easier. And one of the interesting things I'm seeing with some of the younger people in these workplaces is actually quite a bit of resistance because they're much more conscious, I think, about I'm just going into the workforce, or what does the future mean for my career? If I'm training AI to do my job, is it going to replace me? But also the ethical implications around bias and the environmental impact and
Yeah.
copyright and intellectual property. There is a question coming. But I guess just to set the scene,
Yeah.
I'm seeing some things that are maybe not as common sense or as
Interesting.
logical as people think it might be. So I'm interested from your perspective, because you've really got your finger on the pulse around young people and education. What's the sentiment towards AI that you're seeing?
Yeah, it's interesting. Most of our work at the Smith family is actually with parents and carers and supporting their child's education and complementing that. We do a lot with schools and certainly in delivering programs, but a lot with parents and carers, and certainly, and we do that because when you look at the data, parents and carers have the biggest impact on child's education, more than teachers in schools, which is a little concerning. As a parent, when you think about what you could and should be doing, but a wonderful opportunity to really be useful in your child's education. And there's some data that I'm aware of, which sort of rings true when I think about the sentiment with the parents and carers that we work with, is that this study said that only 30% of parents and carers have experimented with ChatGPT. By contrast, it's upwards of 60% of young people between the ages of 12 and 18. And that's probably underreported, given the way young people tend to report on these things. That kind of rings true for me, I think, Kate. I do think most parents and carers are pretty unprepared for this. A lot of the conversations that we're having with our parents and carers are more about social media, as we've discussed. And they're also about cyber risk. So we do a lot of education on that. We're concerned about the harm that might be caused, um, uh, as opposed to, which is where we need to get to, the kind of opportunity around safe utilization of AI in the future. I think there's big opportunities for that. And, that's one of the things we've been advocating for the E-Safety Commissioner, Julian and Grant's done a lot of good work with great resources for parents and carers to be better prepared to support their child because of all those incredible, really concerning risks, in terms of fake images, bullying, misinformation, all those kind of, and also the emotional potential for emotional isolation and dependence. So a lot of really concerning things. And at a time too, when we know young people's mental health is, not where we need it to be as a nation. It's really, really concerning. Again, coming out of COVID, huge costs of living pressures and big, social and economic challenges. So it's a pretty critical time for parents to be, engaged in this change amongst others and talking to their children about this and what it means for them today and their future.
Yeah, and it took us so long to get a handle on social media,
Oh,
and we can't
completely.
afford to do that with AI.
Yeah,
I think one of the things that strikes me with two young children who obviously have been exposed to AI, given the work that I do in
yeah,
responsible and ethical ways, um, I think that our default as humans right now is actually distrust.
yeah,
And it does worry me that our young people are growing up in an environment where, we're literally the last generation that knows that that piece of art was done by a human, that piece of music was written and sung, performed by a human. And this kind of concept of people not being able to identify what's real or
yeah,
not
Yeah.
I think that plays a really big, and it will be that it'll just be natural for our young people and they'll absorb and adapt. But it is
Yeah.
a very interesting time around that, not really knowing what's real.
Yeah.
I've had a family password with my kids since they were young. If anyone ever comes to pick you up, you ask them for the family password. But I've now put that in place with everybody in our family because I've got that much video and audio out in the world that anyone can be me now using AI. And so I've said to my mum, if someone rings you and it sounds like me and I
Yeah.
tell you I'm in trouble, ask them for the family password.
So smart, Kate. Yeah. Hey, that's so considerate. We ran a cyber training exercise recently at the Smith family, and our team put up an audio recording of me and a fake one, an AI generated one. And most people thought the AI one was the real one. That's how good it
Yeah,
is.
wow.
And there's huge risk in that. The most important risk you've called out, the potential impact on children, but organisationally as well.
Mm.
In terms of fraud and access to data, huge risks, I think, that you've just got to, take into account, be so careful about how you address those. It's a
Mm.
big concerning issue. And I mean, I think what it brings to the fore in all of this is that, that old wonderful, it sounds a bit quaint now, but it's important. They're critical thinking skills. They're
Mm.
more important than ever, and that's the great gift, I think, of a fantastic education. If we get it right and don't be confused by some of these more technical knowledge transfer elements of education, which are useful, but that's not what education is all about. It is about wisdom and about critical thinking that we apply and make judgment on different types of data and information to make really good decisions.
Yeah, and hopefully our educational institutions, some are really taking the lead in this space and doing amazing things, and others are being a little slower to, we need to move past this concept that AI is cheating
Yeah.
and look at how we resource and enable young people to use it ethically and responsibly because it's not going away. If we zoom out a little bit, there's a huge surge. We're going to see a plethora, thousands, hundreds and thousands of platforms and tools and things that are available to us because of AI. And a lot of these are claiming to scale impact in the not-for-profit space, to do all, there's all these big wild claims. So from your experience, where's the real opportunity for not-for-profits in the use of AI?
Yeah. You're right. I mean, I get an email every day from someone selling me something, and promising to change my life and the future of our organisation. Look, at the Smith family, even though we're an old organisation, we've been investing in kind of digital transformations for a number of years. So I think we've learned and built up some good disciplines around good business judgment on assessing opportunities carefully and thoughtfully. And the kind of assessment is always around, can we be more efficient and can we be more effective? Efficient in terms of good use of resources, effective in terms of just better outcomes through our work, and then using good disciplines to do that. And obviously, what we're trying to balance in all of this is the balance between the kind of online AI digital experience with the in person, and using evidence to guide the decisions we make there. So, as I said, Kate, we support 73,000 students, a lot of work with students and families. We've got a big evidence base. Research underpins our work. We track outcomes every year in terms of changes in the outcomes of the students that we're supporting. So the rule of thumb, I think, in all of these has got to be evidence. Now, at the moment, we're in a point where things are changing so much. We're building evidence as we go. And that's okay. That's innovation. But making good informed, data informed decisions on the degree to which it's, moving the needle in our work and being more efficient or more effective. So we've been very lucky. We've had some philanthropic support to look at how we use AI in our organisation. We're sharing that with other organisations. We've been running co-pilot test groups for a long time now, and that's been really beneficial. But also looking at this whole opportunity with digital assistance. So certainly doing that in our fundraising work, in better analysis of data in that regard, using it for back end things, particularly in finance and also in payroll compliance, all really important. I think for not-for-profits, given that we typically aren't larger organizations like for-profits, there's actually, I think, other opportunities where the use cases stack up more effectively. So one of the ones that's been really compelling for us is a digital assistant to support our frontline workers. So we have in the order of 250 family partnership coordinators. These are workers in schools, in communities, out there working with in partnership with the schools and with families, all with the aim of ensuring that a young person's education improves through our support. And what these digital assistants are doing to support those frontline workers is where in the past, when we make contact, we make a call, we have a meeting with one of our families and the students that we support, it would take about 20 minutes to pull together the data we need for that conversation from different sources. Now, AI has been incredibly helpful in effectively eliminating that time frame, that amount of time to pull that data together quickly and coherently. That helps us then have a conversation with that family about, the grades of the student that we're supporting, about their recent attendance patterns, about any feedback from the school that we might have on file, or data from some time ago from previous conversations. So you sum that up, 250, 20 minutes each call, that's a lot of savings in terms of time. And what that means is our team members just got more time to invest in having more of those conversations and doing them having the conversations at the right time with the families, and building great partnerships with schools. So that's kind of one example I would give of where we've seen an opportunity to go to your question in terms of, efficiently and effectively trying to scale the impact of our work so we can, support more people.
I know one of the big concerns, I'm doing a lot of work in the community housing space at the moment around the use of AI. And one of the concerns that comes up everywhere is the concern around bias, ethics, data privacy, ensuring that we're protecting vulnerable communities in terms of data. How have you approached that at the Smith family?
Yeah, it's really been very much in our minds. I always say to the team, before we do any impact, we've got to make sure we don't do any harm, from a child safeguarding perspective. And that's become more and more important with the kind of cyber issues. And this is just a new dimension to that challenge. So the way that we've tried to address that is, and there's a lot of good guidance, I think, in how to do this from a governance perspective, really ensuring that you've got guardrails across how you're working as an organisation. We've spent a lot of time as a leadership team and as a board thinking about how we kind of mitigate some of those risks that you've talked about by having a governance rhythm in terms of assessing and validating opportunities, and with a set of principles. Again, the ones that you talked about, and for us, principles that really matter in that are kind of equity, obviously. And I would hope that as we think about this as a nation, equity is front and center. And we think about the opportunity of AI, but also then thinking about human assessment. So nothing that we develop from an AI perspective does not include a final human assessment, because we think that's one of those kind of principles and guardrails to try and mitigate some of those risks that you've talked about.
Yeah, it's we've seen some really big failures recently here in Australia with in Victoria with child protection and big consulting firms using AI to do government reports. So it's one that all organisations, I guess, are grappling with. And so the federal government have put in place these voluntary guidelines, unless they're mandatory in more high risk settings. So have you embraced those voluntary guidelines, and is that what you're using to guide those discussions?
Absolutely. There's great resources out there, and they've been very helpful for us. So the guidelines are useful, principles are useful, and then it's just the kind of the internal rhythms around how we operate. So, we have an executive group that meets monthly in addition to our leadership groups, and we're kind of tracking all those opportunities and trying to, at this point for now anyway, probably centralizing things more than we ordinarily would, just to really get a handle on the activity in the organisation. Some organisations might have a bit of a laissez-faire approach. We're a bit more cautious than that at this point. It's so early that I think you've got to put some guardrails around things and just put the kick the tires on things and make sure that, there's no inadvertently we're not creating more risk, particularly for, the young people that we're supporting.
Do you think we're going to need to go maybe more in the direction of the EU Safety Act? So I know we were talking offline before just around
Yeah.
the way that different regions globally are addressing this.
Yeah.
So the EU Safety Act is much more conservative. They don't get access to a lot of platforms at the moment because they can't meet those regulations. And then you've got, the US that's going, oh, hell bent on innovation, come hell or high water. That's the focus. And we're kind of taking a more balanced approach here in Australia. Do you think we're going to need to become, especially given the way the government's gone with the social media
Yeah, exactly.
regulations, do you think we'll head more in that direction?
I think we probably will. I mean, there's always a balance, and it's really interesting. Earlier this year in Australia, we had the Economic Reform Roundtable with the Treasurer and various business community and other leaders from across the community. And one of the big drivers in that was about trying to remove regulation, talking about what that does to innovation, the costs in compliance it creates for organisations. So you've got that kind of narrative running in the organisation, and this one now running too in terms of, boy, there's big risks here. We don't want to make the same mistakes we made for a generation with social media by letting that kind of run free without any kind of parameters. We learned a lesson there. We're a bit late, but paradoxically, we're leading the world in terms of what we do in that regard. I think you'll see more. I've heard Julian Grant, the E-Safety Commissioner, talking about how to use current legislation as opposed to more legislation to try and solve for some of these challenges, whilst also being in this really rapid learning phase of trying to get our head around things. So it's hard for governments to do that quickly. But look, I mean, I've been in a number of consultation groups with different departments in the Commonwealth who I know are trying to think proactively about providing guidance nationally as to how we both make the most of this opportunity, but mitigate those very real risks that exist as well.
I want to ask you a question more about you and your leadership. And you are probably in the top 5 leaders that I admire. You are an incredible leader, and I've watched your trajectory since 20 years ago when we were on a program together.
Yeah.
So with AI automating admin and analytics and taking a lot of what humans are doing, taking the load of that, some argue that human empathy becomes our most important skill. AI can mirror empathy very well already, but is not empathetic is not a being, it's a tool, it's a piece of technology. So as a CEO in the social impact space, what does humane leadership look like in this crazy breakneck speed, AI accelerated world that we're all heading into? What does that look like for you?
Thanks, Kate. And very nice of you to say those things. And, right back at you too, in terms of the amazing work you've done and pivoting so many times to adapt to all the huge changes going on in the world. Incredible what you've done. Yeah, look, I mean, it's obviously wanting to be kind of people first in all of this. And, there is the risk of becoming a little, I think I said it before, about being a bit seduced by bright, shiny new things and technology that promises a lot of things, and not doing the hard work of building evidence, analyzing data. That might slow you down a bit, but I think it gets you to a better place if you're kind of really committed to putting people first and the data that tells us about the experience of people in the work that we do and in the, in the nation that we're collectively building together. So that's, very much how I think about it. I mean, you're absolutely right. Artificial intelligence is not emotional intelligence. They're different things. And so being empathetic and people first does mean drawing on kind of the emotional intelligence insights that we have from our work that we operate, with students and families, and the great insights that our teams draw in that regard. And it's also then really being clear. We have this conversation a lot about our values alignment. So how do we know that everything we do is aligning up to the values that we subscribe to as an organisation? and ensuring that it's that's the filter, and that makes the judgment if we want to be humane and really focused on people. I think the kind of challenge that I experience with this, as a CEO of the Smith family, is being a CEO and being a learner at the same time. Often people want answers. They want simple answers. They want clear instructions as to do things. And you need to give that in a crisis and for people to have confidence. But in times like now, it's also, I think, really important to demonstrate kind of a bit more of a learner mindset and being clear about what you know and what you don't know, and just being open with people about that so we can all kind of learn this together. And I think what I'm trying to do at this phase of this rapid kind of learning going on for us all and for me and for our organisation is honestly, Kate, just making sure I've got really smart people around me. I did a speech recently to a group of people graduating at a university that I'm involved with. And I said that my KPI, and I achieve this a lot, is to always be in a room with smarter people than I, and be the least smart person in the room. And it's a KPI I achieve a lot. It's true.
That's one of mine too.
Yeah, I know. But I think at this point in history, it's incumbent on us to be learning as much as we can, and that's part of kind of being treating people well. And learning as much so you can apply that, because if you've got these values that really are people focused and centered on getting better life outcomes for them, you want to mitigate these risks but make the most incredible opportunities that exist at the same time. So that's a bit jumbled, but that's kind of how I think about it at the moment, Kate.
And have you found, how's that journey been, I guess, for the people within the Smith family? Obviously, they have a very strong leader at the helm who's guiding, you're guiding them all through this process, and you're clearly creating the space for conversations and really having that human first approach. Have you had any wobbly bits with your teams, with your people, or have they largely embraced the AI opportunity?
Oh, look, I think what you see in society, you would see in every organisation, the full breadth of responses. People worried about being left behind, people frustrated we're not going fast enough, in terms of what we do, people concerned about the kind of risks and really quite sceptical about what this all might mean. So that's the point. I think you've got such a diverse array of experiences and responses. And I always say to the team, and that's a good thing. We don't want conformity. We don't want sameness. We really want diverse thinking, because we know that in the kind of the tension with that, the productive, creative tension of that gets much better outcomes for everyone. So part of what we're trying to do is just carefully work through those things, bring the different mindsets together and get to a better outcome. But yeah, it still has its moments where you're trying to keep everyone on the bus together. This is of a different order, this sort of change. I think, though, we've been on this journey of digital transformation for quite a while and investing in that. So I think it has prepared us a bit for this, but this is kind of next level. I think part of the challenge is for us just making sure we've got the capability and the resources to be investing in this work in the future. That's going to be the next challenge for all of us.
Yes, definitely. So, Doug, as we start to wrap up and looking ahead, I'd love to know, what's your personal hope for how AI could shape the future? So not just for the Smith family, but for the kind of society that, that you want the next generation to really grow up in, I guess.
Yeah. Look, I think from my perspective, what would be just wonderful would be to see the 20-year high in inequity that we have in Australia be reduced through AI. Now, it might be starry-eyed, kind of glib thinking on my part, but if this is a tool that can actually help us bridge the gap and take some big steps in that regard, and it does go to education in many ways as the kind of, education's the pathway out of poverty. It's the thing that unlocks human potential. If we can get that right, then we might see some wonderful progress in reducing inequality in Australia. That's my hope and dream. And that's very much what we're advocating for at the Smith family, as well as all that other kind of solid work that we need to do as an institution. But that's what we're talking about in the forums that we're participating in, Kate.
Look, I am still starry-eyed, and I truly hope that if we lean into this in human-centered, ethical and responsible ways, I think AI can solve some of the greatest challenges that we're dealing with as humans. And I think we all have a responsibility, and you certainly at the Smith family, with parents, with educational institutions, have a responsibility to help people through this transition. And those of us who are just a couple of steps ahead of everybody else, I really hope that everybody takes that responsibility, because there's plenty of people saying get on board or die, and it's not a very humane way of looking at this transition. So really, all of us need to take responsibility to help through this time.
Yeah, no, well summarized. But we really need people like yourself kind of out there helping us kind of understand the full implications and what's possible, because it's obviously many of us are kind of in the weeds on this, and so people who are out there pulling us along, it's fantastic. So appreciate your leadership too, Kate.
Oh, thank you, Doug. And I've really appreciated our conversation today. Now, if people are touched and moved by what it is that you've shared and the mission that you are up to at the Smith family, what's something really tangible that our audience can do to support the work that you're doing?
Thanks for asking, Kate. Well, this is the lead up to Christmas, our big Christmas campaign. This time of year, we hope to raise about $5 million to bring on 11,000 students onto our programs across Australia, and any contribution towards that, we really greatly appreciate.
Amazing. Where do people go to do that?
smithfamily.com.au.
Simple. Thank you so much, Doug. I've really appreciated your time and sharing your wisdom and expertise today.
Great to talk, Kate. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the AI Grapple. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and colleagues and subscribe on your favourite podcast platform. We would love to hear your thoughts, so reach out with any questions or comments about the show. Until next time, keep grappling with AI and stay curious.